What's going on, Workforce? Brian and Chris here, bringing you guys some Q&A from Yoshi P, as well as a few announcements before we dive into the full Q&A. If you guys want to just check out the Reddit thread with the full Q&A without our thoughts and impressions, link will be in the description. But if you're excited for us about what's coming next for the 10 years of Final Fantasy XIV, that presentation is happening on the 18th at 8 p.m. Central. Chris will be live with dinner, hanging out with you guys. I have a prior engagement, so I will be stepping into the live stream, usually probably estimating around 11 Central. So there's probably going to be some like reveals and things like that to handle, but you can go hang out with us over at Twitch. And I think that's going to be a really exciting time, obviously, for what is next with Final Fantasy XIV. Also, guys, as an announcement from myself personally, I did some stand-up comedy this weekend. It went really, really well. I had a great time. I've filmed a vlog about that, so you can go check that out on my Ginger Prime vlog channel if you're so interested in it. But that's all the plugs I wanted to kind of get through. We've got Final Fantasy XIV news. Chris, what's going on with Steam before we jump into the Q&A?
Steam users, you got one more hoop to jump through. At the beginning of March, you're going to go to log in one day, and you're going to have to link your accounts. It's a one-time thing. The information has to match. For some reason, you can't do that. Reach out to support for assistance. It says, please contact Steam for assistance. I assume Steam will tell you to contact Square Enix for assistance, and you get to follow that loop around for a little bit. But hopefully it's no big deal. That should just pair that one more time. But just as a heads up so that you know it's coming, you Steam users out there, remember that Valentine's Day is going on right now through February 21st, reset. And that there is a digital sale to commemorate the Oceanic Data Center coming out. It's got a bunch of mounts and cosmetics of all kinds. So hop over there if you look like 20-30% off, somewhere in that ballpark.
Excellent. All right, let me go ahead and add the screen, which I forgot to do earlier, but it is what it is. Boom, professional. All right, so we've got Fanfest Q&A with Yoshi P and the battle designer, Mr. Ozma. Hints at upcoming changes to the Squadron system. Deep Dungeon confirmed. Astonishment and empathy, most important for creating Final Fantasy XIV's story and world. And so we got this great, like at the end of the day, I think you said it best as a part of kind of our little shenanigans show that we like to do before we actually sit down and film these videos on Twitch. It's pretty much putting about like everybody's probably going to take 3 questions. Like they're not going to be the same 3. So there's going to be some stuff in here that's going to really resonate with you. There's going to be some stuff that you might hear Chris and I go kind of groan at, like, okay, come on, let's get to the good stuff. There is a spoiler question that you can see here clearly on screen. We will skip over that for those of you who have not yet played through Shadowbringers. But beyond that, let's go ahead and
I read it in mine.
You read it in yours? Cool. If you guys want to see Chris cover that question, Gaming Kinda, another plug. Let's do it. Chris, why don't you take us through the first question, because then we'll just skip to question 3 after that.
Why don't male Highlanders and male Rogadin have eyebrows?
Oh, they've got them, Chris. They're just very fake. Whoever asks, we'll have the other person do the answer. I'm in a mood. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, Chris, they've got. You should zoom in. You got to zoom really close in on that. All right, this question is for Chris. Are there plans for mechanics that will check your skill if only the DPS is? So to rephrase that, DPS only skill checks coming for content.
There are currently no plans for this. In pub groups, that's going to lead to way too much stress. And that would cause something like the gorilla gimmick in A5S, where you'd want to have to choose like who could go be the gorilla. We have seen this also more specifically just brought up in general, not by Nakagawa, but Yoshi P, where he has talked about like this is the reason they don't want 1 to 4 man extreme and savage mode dungeons, Mythic Plus type, Fractal type equivalent things, is because they don't actually, and even with the new PvP, they didn't want to scale it down so much because they don't like putting a lot of stress on the individual. They've really enjoyed the 48 and like larger man content as we look to things like the raids added with the relics and all of that. So they like going the other direction. We've also lived through a handful of times that I'm sure Brian can remember where when the amount of player skill was suddenly drastically driven up in a raid, it kind of acts as a wall until we have enough weeks of gear that those players can just be carried through, or general knowledge can start to make those mechanics more commonplace.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what are the favorite battles that Nakagawa has designed?
Sophia, Ozma, and Eureka. When they made Sophia, Mr. Soto was developing Sephiroth, and we were interested but also frustrated if we could go that far when we saw the gimmick of Sephiroth turning giant. So we reworked Sophia and came up with the scales idea. I love that. I love the fact that when we were sitting here, it's like, I think ideas, even if it's not directly related, inspire new ideas. And I've kind of been on a kick and a rant over at Ginger Prime talking about like just the fact that like having new, and the fact that MMOs are actually testing out new ideas and changing things up is good, because we've been kind of in this, kind of this pattern for, I would say, 10 years, maybe so. But now we're seeing Guild Wars 2 drop a new expansion. Now we're seeing these games kind of play. And I think it's becoming exciting to see what people come up with. And the fact that it's happening internally on their own teams, like that makes me happy just as a player, but also it's true within design. So yeah. Oh, you're doing that? Interesting. Ideas just pop off. Anyway, then they say, TL note, this is why Naga is nicknamed Mr. Ozma. On the Mahjong live stream last month, he couldn't make it since he was too busy working on mechanics for Dragon Song, the upcoming Ultimate, and his empty chair had an Ozma figure in its place. All right, a question for Chris. When a tank selects recommended gear, is there a reason it equips fighter gear?
There was a problem with the class system in the prior version. However, in 6.0, this has been changed, and fighter gear is no longer selected. Are there plans to make extreme fights with diverse patterns, such as Seat of Sacrifice?
We make extreme battles to be close to Savage 1 and Savage 2 fights. I think people who like these kind of fights will also like Savage. In addition to this idea, the idea as designers that are in charge can freely make it, and that surprises us. So when it comes to this, I basically, I think that's the kind of a no. Did you get the different answer out of that? Because he just basically described the design theory rather than...
So I would have to guess this question came from somebody that likes Savage and wants more Savage, because what happens is sometimes something like Diamond DX comes out and then it just falls over. And so all the Savage players who are over-geared and overqualified go in and just blast it down, and they don't really get more mechanics to enjoy. And once you're farming up, like people who are farming up totems or something like that, and they're in there just grinding it, they can be done blindfolded, and they just do these fights until they're just blue in the face. And so they're looking for that variety, they're looking for that challenge. But remember, like, Extreme is really meant to be that stepping stone from normal to Savage, and it has a huge ask to do that. I think it does it poorly. I think that the amount from the a player who can get through normal and is not aware of how poorly they're doing normal. Somebody who's doing perfect in normal is fine, but like, you are not told when you're not. So people who don't have good rotations in normal, they're getting hit by things in normal, and then they try to make it to Savage. Extreme is not that much runway to take off that much learning.
Yeah.
So I would not ask for anything more of Extreme. I think it's already being asked of quite a bit, and like, I think it's doing the best it can, but it's there's not enough Extremes to get you from normal to Savage. At some point, you just have to jump in and hope you don't drown.
Mm-hmm. There's no orchestran role for Eorzea de Chocobo. Chocobo, yeah, that's right. I thought I said Chobobo. Are there plans to add it?
Implementation of the songs before the orchestran feature was added, has been postponed. The orchestran scrolls for 6.1 are already fixed. I'll ask those responsible if it can be added for the next patch.
All right. There we go. So the answer sounds like that's going to be coming on its way. All right. Question to you.
Are there plans for bosses that use bigger maps or three-dimensionality more?
There are quite a lot of players expressing their wish for bosses that use the maps in more unique ways. So I think we might adopt that approach in the future. So whatever that ends up equaling, that's kind of interesting.
I don't want it to be gimmicky stuff. I think things like E12 normal feel very gimmicky long term, where like you're just jumping around platform to platform to platform for the sake of it, just as a phase, and that phase doesn't go into Savage like that. That it's just a gimmick in normal.
We saw that with the Greg, trial, etc., where they like you transition across a map for the fight, in that regards. I kind of did appreciate that. I think, and also with like some of the dragon, trials and things like that. I don't think I want it all the time, but it's an interesting mechanic.
Big Bridge. I don't think Big Bridge holds up. When we're walking down,
it was so good at the time, though.
Like, I like the
know,
train.
right? Yeah,
the train is so good when you're jumping into the car with the train. Like, I think that's so good. So, like, it can definitely be done where it feels like it's a mandatory part,
and
it doesn't feel so gimmicky.
All right, yeah.
And I don't like 3-dimensionality. Have you done 3-dimensionality raid fights? Have you done, I guess, like in Guild Wars, like when you think of like underwater combat? Have you played MMOs that do a lot of like 3-dimensional combat?
No. I mean, Guild Wars 2, but not in any raid sense. Not yet. You did some Guild Wars 2 raiding this weekend in preparing for End of Dragon. So it's like, yeah, I definitely am not the target audience for that question yet. Because again, like I liked what I've seen, but I've seen how it's aged. So at the core of it, I don't know. Like I'd be interested in experiencing it more and forming a more insightful opinion.
Okay.
All right. See here. This is a good one. Why hasn't the Squadron system been updated yet?
We intentionally stopped updating it.
Yep.
One reason is we want to improve the quality of trusts in Endwalker, but there's also another big reason. Since it is connected to a future update, there will be an opportunity to talk about this, so please wait a little bit longer. This is one of the bigger ones in here.
Yeah, I'm thinking when he says a little bit longer, that's Friday. Like I'm expecting.
Really? I think it's further out than that.
No, not the update, but they're going to talk about it. I would say I feel like Friday's a big day. I feel like I've been, so set your own expectations, but like I'm saying, like here's what I've been thinking for a long time, and so I'm either going to be excited and elated,
previous predictions,
and I'm going to be frustrated. Yeah, so
Ryan thinks we're getting a 10-year plan on Friday. I think we're getting the first of several reveals of the 10-year plan. So I think we're both thinking it's the same amount of information. I think it'll be split over multiple sessions. Otherwise, Friday's going to be a long night. So
yeah, because
either you're going to be there Friday and I'm going to be like, dude, they just honestly just got started, and you're going to be getting there at 11, or you're going to get there at 11, and we're going to learn about the new Final Fantasy foot massager. Sorry, buddy, you missed it.
Sorry,
show's over.
You missed
People
it.
are stacking chairs.
Let's see here. I think it's really telling. What's up?
We've got to go back up, by the way.
Oh, I missed one?
Yeah, man.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My bad, everybody.
We missed, I think, more than one.
We did?
Yeah, I think we went like whole page.
Oh, goodness. I must have like super scrolled.
Yep.
Bigger maps, more dimensiony. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right, I'll let you take this one then.
I've already done this. I was like, I don't remember getting
I don't remember just jumping right to that.
Okay. Could you add weather and time selection to GPOs?
Due to the many concerns that due to my concerns, so this is Yoshi P speaking for himself, not Brian. This hasn't been implemented. There are many voices in the global version that are also calling for this, but MMOs are not just individual but shared among many people, and I don't think it would be good for one person to become like a god and change the weather at any time. Meaning when you go into GPOs, you're still in the world. So that effect in and of itself, I bet, is costly. Because I remember how pissed people got about stickers. Imagine being like, guys, we had to cut the next ultimate raid so we can actually have a special like instance of the GPOs that pulls you out of that world that you're in into another world so we can actually have you impact the weather.
I mean, so you can freeze time in GPOs.
Mm-hmm.
On
like within the camera.
State the server's in. Yeah, you can lock time so that it doesn't continue moving.
It's easier though to make it your character something as opposed to like what the rest of everybody's experiencing, and that's what Yoshi P's hinting at here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If any of you have ever like watched a stream of somebody trying to get a specific shot, I was watching Sebi Webby do one, and he was trying to shoot a music video, and like literally he was panning around this dead dragoon. Dragoon had like this lay dead emote, and like he wanted it in the sunlight, and the shade in Riktika cast over it. He's like, move, and like the entire production, because he has other people for other shots, all is like running. They're all chasing the sunlight as they like move through the forest. He's like, okay, stop, and like get out of the shot, and everybody's clearing. So like, there's something there that's added when you have to go get something, as opposed to, like from the same logic would be like, hey, how come my retainers can't gather every gathering node in the game? Like, why can't they do every single node in the game? And just like as you just start to like extract reasons to go out and be around other players. And like, why can't I have a market board and all that stuff in my house, and then I teleport direct to my house and then direct into instance, and then everything is trust enabled. And so like if you just keep pulling back the layers, at some point there's not an MMO. Like at some, and I don't know where that threshold is, right? You're just like, on this end you'll know it's not an MMO, and on this end, you know, it is. And there's all these quality of life things in between, and it's, and like they each one on its own seems like, man, that would be so nice. But I do think that he has to walk a tightrope on what we should and shouldn't have.
Oh yeah, always got to walk that tightrope. Now, which mechanics do you think did the best job with making?
Third place, Ozma's form change mechanic. Second place, Sophia's scales mechanic. First place, Eden's Gate spell in waiting.
Very cool.
I like spell in waiting a lot.
Yeah.
It immediately made sense. Immediately. Like, do you remember, like, cosmetically, like in normal, the first run you saw it and you were like, oh, it was so good.
Now back to the Squadrons thing. It says the TL note here is, what are your thoughts and what this could mean? I have to wonder if this is medium term plan on phasing them out, or combining Squadrons with the expanded trust system to cover 1 through 72, or maybe they're just reading too much into it. That's the note that I've made. And I feel like the trusts or something needs to come backwards. We've talked about it at a minimum, maybe like for Praetorium, and now we've seen trust as a part of an 8-man kind of system, kind of fixing kind of some of these like gaps, as opposed to like a full implementation, because it's very rare. I've always stated that whenever they take something from the new expansion and bring it into the core game, that's a love letter to the community, because that takes a lot more work than people think it does. It's very complicated work to go back into the game itself and say, hey, we added this, like we see with the fates. Like the fate changes right now, or fates forward with the bicolor gemstones. If they ever go and add bicolor gemstones to the fates in ARR, etc., like that's a love letter to the community, because that takes a lot more work than just adding that in that expansion and forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so you and I were at the media tour when they revealed trusts, and we were given an interview with Yoshi P, and we asked, okay, so how long till this goes backwards? Like oh, how naive we were. And he basically explained to us that like trusts are an individual script thing. So I don't think it's going to be a light switch where it just says, and 1 to 70. I think you're going to see it be something that gets added the same way that our orchestra and scroll type comment did earlier, where it's 1 at a time. So it's going to start by saying, guys, I'm excited to announce that, the trial that everybody memes into the ground is no longer going to be in trial roulette. That is now a trust scenario for those players moving forward. You will still be able to manually queue for it, just like the optional dungeons. But you will no longer get that as part of your trial roulette. It's a waste of time. It's not very good experience. It's not a great experience. It's not a great, like, enjoyable, like I'm not talking XP, but like, it's not an enjoyable process to get that. And then next we'll add one of the story 8-mans.
Yeah.
And so like, I think it would be added slowly. I don't think it's now everything Sestasha forward is good. Or like, oh, all of Heaven's Word is added to trust. I don't think it'll be that black and white if it ever does go back.
Right.
All right. Since Eden's Verse, damage downs have been added versus vulns. What was the reason for the change in debuffs?
For high difficulty content, I think this is superior to the damage increase debuff in various aspects. With the damage up debuff, the healer is burdened and it's difficult to adjust for the effect size. With damage down debuff, the healer is not burdened and it is more fair. It also allows for groups to practice more before actually hitting the enrage. So it does punish the group, but it doesn't punish one specific role within the group itself, if that makes sense, because ultimately you're kind of accomplishing the same thing. It only just lets you progress further in the fight, in theory. What do you think?
Yeah, I for how scripted our fights are in 14, I think seeing the fight is a big part of it. So anything that lets you see more fight, having somebody lay dead on the ground because they're a black mage and they took 2 vulns and got smacked by something a third time and died, and then they blame the healer. Oh, I didn't get heals.
Right.
As opposed to just like nerfing their DPS into the ground, which in theory we're not measuring anyway. And then when the party falls short, we just know that like, hey, more would have been better. And they're like, oh, I was pushing my buttons. It's like, yeah, but you had 27 damage downs. So I think it's a better play. I think that twice come and thrice come ruin is better.
Yeah, I like those mechanics too, but obviously they have a different approach to it. Now, could there be a way to confirm when hunters have killed an S rank?
See, this is back to the weather thing. This way, it would become content that can be done in a detached way. When what we want is for players to exchange information. It's a joint endeavor of players using external sites to track S-rank spawns, so we don't want to make it too convenient.
Yeah, so that kind of
this is like if the world would notify you that Chi was up.
Right. So, and when I get into various debates about the state of MMO within Final Fantasy XIV, because everybody kind of has a different opinion depending on when they came into what the MMO genre is. And as somebody who played more sandbox, like I would go, oh, that's what I look more, and that's what I always am trying to be clear about. But when I get into these discussions, like on Twitter or on, like on a stream, people tend to bring up the hunts as a MMO piece of content. And actually, I agree. The hunts are very multiplayer. And what they just answered here for you is literally that. Like, if they take that away, that, like, hey, this is content that we want you to talk. We have content where you do not need to talk, but we want also content where you need to talk. Like, that is what is a part of what MMO is. And so people are like, oh, 14 is an MMO because they have hunts. And I go, MMO, that's an MMO piece of content, but it's, as a whole, like, that's why I say 14 as a Final Fantasy game sits on top of one, because it has all these different avenues for you. And that's not a diss on the game. That's just my interpretation of the term. And so I'm really happy the Yoshi said that, because like if they go, like you said, like the risk is that you end up saying you taking away every ability, and then all of a sudden the players look up and they're like, why isn't this just a single player game? Like, why is this game online and I have a subscription at all? Like where's the community? And it's like, oh, the community all just kind of went their own way into their own little friend group. What do you think?
I agree with you. To counterpoint, because I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
But from the other direction, how much content have you gotten to do in Guild Wars at max level?
Like in terms of like fractals, I haven't done the
Just
fractals yet.
Anything.
But yeah, I've got a couple max levels. I've mostly been leveling. Like that ends up being kind of my thing I enjoy relaxing wise. But go ahead.
So there's a couple of things that you need to do at max level depending on your objectives. There's a bunch of objectives. It's a lateral based game, so you kind of just pick a direction and go that direction. For people that are just out in the world, sometimes you'll just see some giant boss and there's a whole bunch of people fighting it and you just join on in. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of act like hunts. They're these big world bosses. There are people who need specific drops from specific world bosses, in which case their schedule is actually posted. So there's an official, well, I don't know if it's official, but there's a tracker on the website. I believe it's official. Mm-hmm. It seems to be perfectly accurate. And so there's a tracker, there's a website where you can hop out and you can go see exactly when that boss will be up again. And you can go sit there and farm it. And so there are kind of these notices. You don't know when it goes down, but you do get notified like what world events are going on at what time. And so you end up with this mix of like hardcore players that are there for that specific drop. They know the fight. They're there to they're happy to tell people if we need to split into groups, what we need to do. And then there's new players who are just like, I don't even know what's going on. And then there's players who are like, hey, I just got to level cap. I'm just going world event to world event because these things are freaking awesome. So the counterpoint would be that by telling us more about what's going on, maybe in-game, we could incentivize that more. That's still true. Doesn't mm-hmm. justify having us know when it goes down. Mm-hmm. It's more about linking direct to the external sites and saying, like, we want to help you track when it's up.
Here's a thought, and I'd love to know, and this is just brainstorming, legitimately just popped in the top of my head. What if, in terms of like the RPG, there was a way that you as a player got to equip a trait? And now assume that there's these traits that you could choose from, right? And that trait gave you a notification of when a certain hunt, like, hey, you're feeling a presence of danger, in this area, etc. Meaning not everybody would have that. And thus you get to choose if that's something you want. And then you could also then, in terms of like a guild or community, be the hunt caller, right? So that the system doesn't actually become, hey, we're notifying everybody. The system is like, whoa, guys, spider sense tingling, typing in chat, like this is what's about to happen. And then it has that, in a way, it's a feature that the game offers, but it's a feature that basically gives the responsibility onto players who choose to opt in.
Hunts kind of have that now, but you have to be in zone.
You got to be a part of these link shells, but yeah.
No. Like they have a thing that says your senses or whatever. Like it pops up in the chat log, the event log. So they kind of have that.
Well, imagine being like
when there's an A rank, but it won't notify you like when you're in Ulda that there's something going on in Thule. It's not going to tell you that. So that would be a shift. I will tell you, like this community as a whole has been trained and conditioned that all characters can do all things. And so anytime Yoshi P has given us choice, people have said, cool, I'll take all of them. So like we're not very good at understanding that like for choice to matter, it is just as much about the road not taken as the road that is. The answer can't be, yeah, I went left and right. Like that's not how choice works. And so like we have a game here that has never asked choice of us in the past. So that would be a huge, like, how do you decide which zones, even if every player gets to sense a single zone, how do people not just like all pick the same zones and then get mad that like, well, why can't I favorite 3 zones? Why can't I favorite 10 zones? And so at some point it just gets to where you're just getting the feature that's being asked for here.
Yeah.
Tell me when it's up. Tell me when it's down.
All right.
Are there mechanics that can be skipped depending on the boss's HP? Do you take this into account during development?
All right. So it says we do consider it in 2.x. It was often the case that phases changed depending on HP, but unexpected skips sometimes occurred. We didn't make much use of this in the Omega raids, but the reason why it was difficult to adjust the balance. So I think that makes sense, and that's why that's why DPS actually became such a priority, because you could be like, oh, we can cut down on all kinds of things we have to worry about. What do you think?
The problem with tying something to a percentage is you either have to be okay with like there being times that people want to have to pull DPS because like pushing into the next phase hurts them. So stop dots.
Yeah.
Or you end up kind of rushing phases. What happens if you skip phases? If you have a trigger at 50% and 25% and we come back, what happens when people come back and run it as legacy content? Kind of blast it down, which like our Wondrous Tales log encourages us to do. So like that's not just like, oh, well, some people are doing that unsynced, but that's an optional thing. No, the game actively encourages you to do unsynced content. But then in addition to that, you have to think about like how does that feel? It doesn't feel good long term is really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Is it causes weird things later. It causes things to break. And it doesn't create a really immersive experience as opposed to saying like after this much time, because it forces it, or you have to have this invuln. And so for any of you that have done your MSQ roulette recently, it doesn't feel good when like the boss drops to 0.1% and you're all still doing damage and it doesn't die.
Right.
You're like, oh, so I guess you can't die then. Any of you who have played Lost Ark, we have, so I guess the NPC has to come in and last hit this for me.
Yeah.
Like and then we show up in town and they're like, you guys did equal things. And it's like, yeah.
Equals.
I got him to 0.1 and then it animation locked me. Okay. I don't think it sounds good, and it's how a lot of old MMO fights were done. But I think there's a reason that encounter design has matured beyond that, because long term they've found better solutions.
Yeah.
Is the Crystal Tower in the first safe?
It's already secure. The Crystal Tower is from the future timeline after the 8th calamity, and it was strictly regulated by Garland Ironworks. I got nothing to really add there. All right. Are there any plans for more difficult solo content, such as the Bajja duels?
I think it would be a waste for it to end there. I'd like to do something with it in the future. For example, if you could be challenged by Gilgamesh on the source maps, or by Seidu in Azim's Steppe, players could gather to watch. That would be very MMO-like.
I absolutely love this answer. I think essentially like taking what I interpret this then as is like, hey, we've developed this and we've talked about critical engagements and things like that being brought into the open world. And I think that would be something exciting. But tapping back into a couple of things here, you end up having Yoshi P talk about the difficulty in the designing. You also have the difficulty in making sure that those maps are populated, and why would people want to go do that? But here's the real thing that I pull from that would be very MMO like. I think we're going to lean more into that adventurer as opposed to that story narrative warrior light that we've been on for the last 7-8 years now. So like there's a couple little hints here that I'm gathering, and I'm obviously making my own assumptions, but that's just what we're doing, making our own commentary and why we think the way we think. So what do you think about this answer, Chris?
I think Mr. Happy actually asked, I believe it was Mr. Happy that asked if we could get the world boss type fate events of the last relic grind to come out in the fates of Endwalker.
Yeah.
This was pre-Endwalker launch. So could we start to integrate that, like, there was a more interesting fate system to see the fate in Shadowbringers? We added bicolor gemstones, which added a lot to the way fates felt, but it didn't really change the way fates function. And so could we bring in some of the Bosjan Zadnor aspects of the way we interact with those fates out into Endwalker fates, so that there were more roaming bosses? We could trigger events that pulled people from the zone into it and things like that. And Yoshi P talked about that not being really possible because of the amount of resources involved. This tells me that that is not an issue of the devs not having anybody on the team that thinks that'd be a cool vision. It's literally just a resource thing. Because saying Gilgamesh on source maps, Sado and Azim Steppe, sounds like what Mr. Happy was asking about as a, wouldn't it be cool if? So that just tells us the thing about resources, like things get cheaper to integrate over time in theory. Right. They don't in actuality always, but like it does tell us that there may come a day where this game either has enough extra resources or the game has been reworked in such a way that things are cheap enough. They talked about with the trust system. They have actually spent a lot of work this time around on the trust system on kind of back end sides to it to make sure that it would not have to take as senior of a experience level of a dev to work with it. That they made it to where lower level devs on the team, maybe less experienced devs, would be able to use it. And that means that now there's more people that can spend time in that tool, which means that tool can be used for more things. And so if Fates go through a similar rework, maybe you start to see things. We talked about that with Unreals. I hope they're designing these in a way where they're scalable. Yeah. Imagine if they design Fates so that they're scalable, so that not in Endwalker, but maybe next expansion, some of the Endwalker Fates can make their way into that expansion. At first, that'll feel a little weird, but what happens when they work backwards? And okay, now Shadowbringers Fates and Endwalker Fates and 7.0 Fates are all taking place in 8.0 zones. And you start to just layer and layer and layer so that these can feel like these really crazy events are going on, and you're out there and there's just things popping up and there's all these callbacks and there's fun loot and it's more emergent gameplay.
Now, we do have a new question, and this is a big one, but we also just got rated by Rurikon. Guys, if you're not following Rurikon over on YouTube, honestly, just awesome guy. We podcast with him on Crystal Core. We also I podcast him with more on Epic Loot. Just been playing Lost Ark. I'm very excited to talk more about that with him as well. So
that's what he was playing today, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was hanging. I like to lurk.
Yeah.
I'm a lurker.
He hadn't found the Ark yet.
He's failed. Well, never mind. Don't follow him. He's completely failed you.
It's still lost.
It's still lost. All right. The question's to you. This is my answer. So.
Okay. Are there plans for a new deep dungeon?
No, stop asking. Go home. You're drunk. Yes, there have been many requests on this for the global market. We plan to implement a new deep dungeon in 6.x. Now, how and that looks like, they've also talked about like Relic and like all these systems and things like they built. I really, one of the things about the surge and especially the content drought going in Endwalker was just how much we got to jump into the deep dungeon. And my only thing that I wished about that system was to have my level capped stuff. Just because I was like, man, I would love to do this with all of my skills. And that it's just and take it or leave it. Like, you don't have to agree with it, but that's where I was like, I actually really enjoy this system. I really, really like this system. And to see it come back, and Yoshi P's talked about that he, he was like, oh, people really missed that. They took those resources and put them into Eureka, into Bozia. And so maybe we'll see some kind of stuff happening in the long run with that. So I'm very excited for this answer. What do you think, Chris?
I was not as surprised as you are. This has been something that, like, the last several interviews have been this straightforward that it's coming. Mm-hmm. And the only thing we're missing is a timeline, the patch on when it drops. That we know it's coming in 6.x, but 6.x is
it's long. We
long.
We don't even know if it goes 5. Like, it could, like, we will find out Friday, maybe.
We could have 2 years.
They could be like, well, I think they were probably going to try to reset, so we could get a 0.6 or a points, because I think that Yoshi P is like, I would rather launch this in the summer than have to do that what we did against all of the winter.
2.5-year expansion.
Could be, in theory.
We just started.
So,
like, it doesn't really give us anything about timeline. Historically, he does not tell us what is in 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.5 during the 0.1 live letters. Mm-hmm. And so I don't expect us to get a timeline on this yet.
Yeah.
I think it will be added, not in 0.1, because 0.1, we've got PvP, housing, ultimate, like, we've got plenty. Mm-hmm. For a 0.1 patch. It's a meaty patch for everything from hardcore all the way down to casual players. It's a meaty patch. And so there's no reason to put anything else in it. You should save those things and beef up 0.2 and 0.3 and 0.4. So I don't think it's yet.
Yeah. How is it decided which NPC characters to make into minions? Are there plans to make minions of villainous characters?
This is a big question. Chili Demon, Hudat, and Prince Nerva supporting us. Thank you so much. Let's jump into this. This actually ended up being one of the more revealing questions that I would have never thought to ask. Monster-style minions are left to the device of the responsible team. But for NPC minions, they are all checked in order to avoid spoilers. NPC minions are only made when their character has finished their role. So please think, if that character does not have a minion, they still have yet a role to play. Now, what's odd about this is there are minions of Scions, are there not? Are there no Scion minions?
Yeah, there are.
And they still have a role to play at the time that those minions are added. And then there's other minions that, like, so, like, this is targeting specifically villainous characters. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a weird question. Yeah. And it makes you want to go back. And then also, like, to avoid spoilers. And you're like, You're saying every NPC's minion is not, like, kind of spoilery? I don't know. It's a weird question. And it makes you ask a lot. Yeah, it's a weird question. Okay. Are the development team's intended strategies and the player strategies similar?
It's half and half. We don't want players to intimidate, imitate. Thank you. I was like, I am 8. It's like, where's the IT? Our strategy is too much, but instead freely come up with our own. We are shocked when we see the Mentor Marathon strategy for second coil turn 4. And that's always kind of the thing. Like, it's, we talked about DPS meters a little bit. And it's that's
they have rage fight, right?
Well, they have
We found it was easier to let it enrage and just heal through it than to do the intended mechanic,
which is interesting. And then essentially you have that was the a good time. No, the second coil. No, the enraged fight was.
Is that it?
No, that's turn 2.
Oh, is it turn 2?
Yeah, like for the first coil. But
I'm sure that was another moment where they're like,
oh. But it's interesting to always see, like, we've seen them and they hang out in the various different streams, and it's like kind of seeing how people adapt to their various mechanics. And obviously, like, this comes down from me speaking as a developer. Like, I might design something one way, and then it's always interesting to see how people then interact with that design. And you always find people will have different things that how they interpret and that's always valuable information. So then you can take that information and be like, okay, we saw that they did it this time, and you end up, I think, where he means half and half. Like, there is a little bit of give and take because they were able to watch the streams and see kind of that information. You know, it does have an impact on their like future designs and vice versa. But yeah, cool. Is it possible to increase the number of UI hotbars?
We can't give a firm commitment, but we'll consider it.
Firm commitment. And then our last question.
Oh, what is the most important thing to think about when making Final Fantasy XIV's world and story?
As the director, astonishment and empathy are the most important things to me. The scenario is made so that there are elements where it's good to think about our own society. We try not to make perfect characters, and we try to accept different ways of thinking. And that's, I think, when he nails that, I feel that throughout the story of Final Fantasy XIV. It's that the development of characters, the juxtaposition of various different points of view, and how that all plays along in the grand scheme of things. Utterly quite fascinating. That's just my take. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think that what they think about with writing has always been like a story of redemption, but has always been baked in reality. It's always been baked in flawed characters, and that's what allows us to care. It's one of the reasons that I get frustrated when people say, like, if this person dies, then like I can't like this game. Like, to live in a world where things have to work out, it's just not the world that Final Fantasy is. Like it, and so like it has grit, it has moments where things don't work to plan, and that's part of it. And the fact that you would be hurt by their loss is a sign that they really matter. The fact that we should legitimately fear that, and we should not just say, you know what, Yoshida did come down and say that officially this person has plot armor and will never ever hurt and die, and so every time they're in danger in the cutscene, we can pretty much just go make popcorn because we know they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
That kind of takes away from it. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that was the Q&A. Epic stuff. And this week's going to be filled with information, lots of discussion, and so much more. Chris is feeling better. You had some travel, and then you were like feeling sick last week. We got Lost Ark. We got Guild Wars 2. Yeah, MMOs are back, baby. Like, at the core of it, like, I am, as a MMO fan, I am just like on cloud freaking 9 right now. And it's exciting to see so much. And there's a lot that we can kind of start to wonder about based off of this Q&A alone. But we're going to have more information to share with you guys on Friday. Chris, why don't you take us out?
Guys, remember, Friday, 6 p.m. PST, adjust for time zone accordingly. That is dinner time here in the CST. So we will be covering that. Brian will come in late. These are several hours long. This one does look like it'll be live translated if they ever are not. The Final Fantasy XIV Reddit Discord are the heroes that make that possible for all of us that don't speak Japanese. And so thank you to them as always. Just in case, just always thank them. Even when we don't need them, thank you for what you do. And so that is what we are doing. So we'll be covering that. Lots of information coming. This one will include the 10-year plan in theory. This is something they have not done since the 2.0 stuff. So this is a definite change of pace for us. So we'll be along for the ride with you. Expect that coverage to be here. And until then, take care.